Jeffrey Becker, how you doing, man? It's been a bit. Good to
I'm
see
good.
you.
How are you doing?
Good, good. Hey, so I like to talk to folks who have been kind of keeping up on COVID-19 since it all started, and I can't even imagine anybody that would have a better seat to what's been going on in the past 10, 11 months than you have with just some of the research, some of the projects that you've been involved with. So I don't know. I don't even know where to start with you, but what do you think? And I'm interested in hearing from you. You're seeing it, when we talk about digital transformation, technology, how that plays into COVID-19, healthcare process in general. Where do we start, man?
Yeah, I mean the reality of it is it's been a long 10 months, but I think we're only just at the tip of the iceberg. Where there's going to be a long tail of just optimizing these processes and these new technologies ahead of us. But I think that really to answer that question, where you start, you've got to go hop in the Wayback Machine and go back to end of 2019 and take a quick snapshot of what did the world look like from a health IT standpoint. How well prepared and well armored were we to deal with something like COVID-19 in March 2020? There's lots of different studies. We have our own, of course, but generally what we found when we looked at sort of the state of digital health and digital front door leading into the pandemic was that there was about a 25% adoption of virtual services or virtual care services, so low adoption. Remote patient monitoring was pretty minimal, even lower in the teens. So coming into the March timeframe, you don't have technologies in place to have doctor-patient connectivity, care at a distance, virtual services, remote patient monitoring, none of the things that really became critical to our response in the April, May, June, July timeframe. They weren't there. It was outsiders that were delivering those kinds of services. It was Doctors on Demand and Amwell and MD Live and Teladoc, outside organizations, because virtual care didn't really pay the bills. It was reimbursed at a much lower rate. The EHR vendors weren't really doing a great job integrating those kinds of solutions into the core tech, either on the patient portal side or for the clinician in the EHR. So it was just not an easy implementation, that not really something that reimbursed well. So there wasn't much calling traditional healthcare organizations to implement and bring those systems up. Now you're March 12th, and you have months worth of in-person brick and mortar patient schedules, and we're all facing shelter in place orders. So what do you do? What do you do if you are the CIO or the CMO of a health system and you have months worth of in-person patient visits that you need to pivot to virtual visits if you can? Well, the first thing that they actually did was they poured through those schedules and they looked for any patient visits that they could just cancel or defer. The government helped. CMS mandated that we defer elective procedures. So you saw a lot of the elective procedures get deferred. You also saw a lot of the in-person office visits. If they weren't for something acute, they got deferred. And so what the reality on the ground was at that time frame was docs were buying up webcams, outfitting their laptops, figuring out ways to implement bare bones virtual care solutions. HHS passed HIPAA waivers so that me and you, we could do this over WebEx, Teams, Google Meet, anything. Didn't matter if there was any kind of security protocol in place at all. It was just an effort to get some audio video connectivity between the doctor and the patient. So that's really the beginning of the story that has been the last 10 months, was there was this whole hog rush to pivot that in-person schedule to something virtual and then put the pieces in place to support that care at a distance, because the offices were being closed and we really weren't able to deliver care. There's a really interesting stat here in Boston. I follow the Boston numbers more closely, but in February, 0.1% of Medicare visits were done virtually. This is a traditional primary care visit for the Medicare population, 0.1%. In April, 79%. The astronomical growth. But you're seeing that across the country. That is what the reality and the numbers of this kind of growth looks like. So it's been a wild ride ever since the March timeframe.
I was wondering how it seemed like it happened fast, because you and I, we've been talking about this stuff and trying to pitch this to healthcare for the past 10 years, I would say, right? These types of technologies, these types of solutions, jumping through these hurdles, getting past some of the limitations in the legal matter. I was wondering how it was able to happen so quickly. It was just at such a rate I've never seen in healthcare before. And like now that you mentioned, HHS coming out there and wiping clear any types of HIPAA regulations just to try to get something in place, like that makes a lot of sense because that's a lot of hurdles that we had to jump through for the past decade that now we're probably moved away and out of there. What's the cleanup effect from that now that people are going back through and now they have to put those safeguards into place that they've already started down these paths on?
Well, fair question. And I think, it's not just the security that HHS waived. There were more barriers than just technical that prevented health systems from implementing telehealth. The biggest one was that it didn't make business sense. It doesn't make business sense to pivot a visit that reimburses 3 or 4x what a virtual visit does, and then invest in a solution that moves a higher paying service to a lower paying service.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense. And that's why I think you saw we could have overcome the technical hurdles years ago if it made good business sense to invest in this. It just didn't.
Great point.
But HHS also introduced payment parity. So they were reimbursing telehealth visits for the same rate as in-person visits. Now you have HIPAA waiver, payment parity, all of the non-technical issues that were preventing us from adopting this were gone. The cleanup is a whole nother side of the conversation because yes, the CIO is responsible for making sure that we get a more integrated and more seamless experience on the front end. That a patient, right now, your patients will get a text message with the link to a Zoom meeting and they'll go log in there and then they'll wait in an empty room. And if the doctor's running 20 minutes late, they have no way of knowing that. They're just sitting in an empty virtual waiting room. It's not a clean patient experience. So the technology side, there's a long way to go to make sure that all of those point solutions we talked about are integrated together. There's a unified patient experience, and it integrates back to like the patient portal, the central hub of the patient's UX. On the provider side, making sure that they have a schedule and they can launch out and it'll be in the EHR so that as I'm talking to you, I can navigate through your chart, I can do some of the documentation, I can place orders, and it's a more integrated experience. For 2021, that's what the IT side of the house is going to be worried about. What the CFO and the CMO are going to need to address is investment or divestment decisions at the end of the pandemic. Do we even want to keep doing this? So Seema Verma has said many times that the genie is out of the bottle on telehealth. But all that we can ascertain that she means by that is that they're going to continue covering it as a benefit, but no one's made any conclusive decisions on payment parity. And that's important because the providers, the cleanup will be payer to provider negotiations to continue pushing the ball forward on how much we're actually getting reimbursed for these visits and justification for sustained use of telehealth when there isn't a pandemic in place.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that's going to develop. Just don't even know how that's going to go, right? So I want to think that the parity will be in place and will continue, but who's to say at this point? I've seen crazier things in the past 7 years alone in healthcare, so I don't know. Awesome talking about this. I hope we could do this throughout the year because I think it's just going to be more and more rapid with new things that that will pop up in the next couple of months that we'll circle back, talk about that we weren't even thinking that would even be a point of conversation for this time frame. So again, thank you for doing this with me. I hope to do it again in the future. I always ask a hot seat question, put you on the spot a little bit. Do you mind? Are you ready for it?
Of course. What do you got?
All right. So one of my favorite questions to ask people is, if you had 30 minutes, you could spend time with anybody either throughout history or in current times. Who would you spend that 30 minutes with, and what would you do?
That's a good question. I think I'd go get hot dogs and a beer with Dave Chappelle. I think that many times he would have an interesting perspective, but I've always enjoyed his view on scenarios and situations, and I think that we're all trying to be better than who we've been, and he's pretty persistently carried a voice of integrity and being true to his value system. So I'd love to hear what he has to say. I'd love to hear what he has to say about our healthcare predicaments and how we can do better about working with underserved populations, and just pick his brain about my world. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Hey, that's a great one. David Chappelle, love him. So that's a good one. Love hot dogs too.
Yeah.
Hey man, always great catching up with you. Hopefully not too much time goes by until the next time. Hey, stay safe. Appreciate what you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon. All right.
All right, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah.